Imagine you are walking along a riverbank 60,000 years ago, and you hear footsteps that aren't yours. You freeze. Through the reeds, a figure steps out, shorter than you, built like a wall of muscle, skin pale from generations in the cold. This is a Neanderthal, and for 100,000 years, beings like this shared the planet with your ancestors. You're not imagining a monster. You're imagining a neighbor who eventually disappeared forever. Here's the part that should stop you cold. That moment wasn't rare. For most of human history, there wasn't just one kind of human walking the earth. There were several, scattered across different continents, each one surviving in its own way. And then, one after another, they all stopped existing. Except for one, you. So what actually happened? Was it a war we won? A disease we carried? A slow disappearance nobody noticed until it was too late? Let's meet the species first, then find out. Start with the one you've probably heard of, the Neanderthals. They weren't primitive. Their brains were, on average, slightly larger than yours. They controlled fire, made tools, and survived brutal winters in Europe for over 300,000 years, far longer than modern humans have even existed. They were built for cold, with stocky bodies made to handle harsh weather. If toughness alone decided who survived, Neanderthals should have outlasted everyone. They didn't. The last Neanderthals disappear from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago. But here's the strange part. They didn't vanish completely. If you have European or Asian ancestry, a small percentage of your genes are Neanderthal. They didn't disappear so much as they were absorbed into the population that replaced them, generation after generation, until the bloodline blurred so much that Neanderthal stopped being its own group and became a faint trace inside someone else. Now, go east, into a cave in Siberia. In 2010, scientists pulled DNA from a single finger bone. It didn't match modern humans. It didn't match Neanderthals either. It matched nothing on record. They had discovered an entirely new human species nobody even knew existed. They named them Denisovans, and almost everything we know about them still comes from a tiny handful of bones and teeth. What's strange is how much that handful still told us. If you have ancestry from parts of Melanesia or Papua New Guinea, you may carry a noticeable percentage of Denisovan DNA, including a gene that helps modern Tibetans survive at extreme high altitude, inherited directly from a species that vanished tens of thousands of years ago. A human species you'd never heard of may be quietly helping someone breathe right now on a mountain on the other side of the world. Then there's a species that sounds almost too strange to be real. On a remote Indonesian island, scientists found the bones of fully grown adult humans barely 3 feet tall. This wasn't one unusual person. It was an entire population, nicknamed the Hobbits, that lived in isolation for possibly over 100,000 years. And the unsettling part, their remains date to roughly 50,000 years ago, meaning this tiny, separate human species may have still been alive around the same time modern humans were spreading through the region. Local island folklore even talks about small, hairy forest people surviving long after. Nobody can prove a connection, but nobody can fully rule one out either. Now here's a species that almost nobody outside of science has heard of, and it might be the strangest one yet. In 2013, cavers in South Africa squeezed through a passage so narrow only a few people could fit through it. Deep underground, in total darkness, they found a chamber packed with bones belonging to at least 15 individuals. This was Homo naledi. What makes naledi so strange is this. Its brain was roughly a third the size of yours, closer to a chimpanzee's. By most assumptions, a brain that small shouldn't be capable of complex behavior, and yet those bodies appear to have been placed in that chamber deliberately, again and again, in a space that's almost impossible to reach by accident. Some researchers believe this looks like intentional burial. If true, a small-brained, primitive-looking relative may have been treating its dead with care long before, or completely separate from, anything modern humans were doing. The debate is still unsettled, but it raises an uncomfortable question. How many human species existed that we still know nothing about, hidden in caves we haven't found yet? So picture the full cast. Neanderthals built for the cold, Denisovans known mostly through DNA, tiny island-dwelling hobbits, and the mysterious cave-dwelling naledi. Several human species, same planet, overlapping time, and almost universally the same outcome. Why? The first explanation people reach for is simple. We killed them off through war. It's tempting, and conflict definitely happened. But the evidence for large, sustained warfare between species is thin. There are very few confirmed sites showing direct combat. What you mostly find instead is quiet decline, not battlefields. The second explanation is slower and far less dramatic: competition. Modern humans likely had more advanced tools, bigger social groups, and more flexible ways of finding food. If two groups are hunting the same animals in the same valley, you don't need a single violent event for one to lose. You just need a small, repeated disadvantage. Imagine two neighboring groups hunting the same herd for generations. One slightly better at tracking, slightly better at storing food for winter. Neither side ever fights the other, but over 1,000 years, the slightly less efficient group shrinks a little more each generation, while the other grows. Run that quiet math for 60,000 years, and you don't need a dramatic event to explain an extinction. The third explanation is climate, and it doesn't care how strong or smart you are. This period saw extreme swings in temperature and rapid changes in environment. Neanderthals were incredibly well adapted to a specific cold European world. But being perfectly built for one environment is risky. When that environment changes fast enough, the very thing that once kept you alive can become the thing that finishes you off. The fourth explanation should make you a little uneasy, because it points back at you: disease. When separated populations meet for the first time, they often carry sicknesses the other side has never been exposed to and has no defense against. This is well documented in more recent history, and there's a real chance something similar happened tens of thousands of years earlier, on a smaller scale, as modern humans expanded into land already held by other species. No battle required, just contact. And then there's the explanation that complicates everything: interbreeding. Modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans had children together, repeatedly, across different times and places. So did these species actually go extinct, or did they merge, slowly losing their separate identity, the way a small river loses its name once it joins a much larger one? You are, quite literally, living proof that the line between vanished and absorbed is blurrier than the question assumes. The honest answer is that no single explanation covers everything. Different species likely disappeared for different mixes of reasons, at different speeds, in different places. There may be no single villain in the story, just multiple species, multiple pressures, and one species that happened to combine just enough flexibility, cooperation, and luck to keep going when the others didn't. Which brings you back to that riverbank, 60,000 years ago. Two human species looking at each other through the reeds. Neither one knew it was witnessing the early stages of something that would take thousands of years to play out. You exist because your specific ancestral line happened to survive a process that wiped out every other branch on the same tree. Not because you were destined to, but because generation after generation, enough small advantages stacked up. It's worth sitting with that for a second. For almost the entire existence of humans, being human wasn't one single thing. It was several different answers to the same question, walking around at the same time on the same Earth. None of those other species knew they were living through their final chapter. The last Neanderthal family huddled in a cave wasn't thinking about extinction. They were thinking about the next meal, the next winter, the same small concerns you have right now. Extinction never feels like extinction while it's happening. It only looks that way thousands of years later, looking back. They didn't get an answer. You did. So if you ever feel like the odd one out, remember this. Somewhere in your genes, you might be carrying a fragment of someone who looked nothing like you, lived a life you can't imagine, and vanished so long ago that almost nothing remains of them except a few strands of code, quietly running inside you right now, without you ever noticing. You're not just human. You might be the last chapter of several stories at once.